Well, folks, here we are back again for another great 5 Points podcast. My name's Monte Manson, and guess what? We're celebrating Women's History Month this month of March. And to do that, we're going to have a great number of folks here. We've got one special guest that we're going to be speaking about women's history and her experience here within CAL FIRE.
Without those scars and that human failure and getting back up and brushing yourself off, then you lose the importance of contribution to the next person.
It's going to be a good one. Sit back, stay tuned. Let's get cooking. All right, folks, here we are for another wonderful 5 Points podcast with the Chief. I am Monte Manson, and this is a very, very special podcast that you're going to experience with us today. So with that, I'd like to kick it over to our Director and Fire Chief, Mr. Joe Tyler, to talk about what this special occasion is.
All right, thank you. And welcome, Serena. We'll talk a little bit more here in just a couple minutes, but it is so important that we recognize that March of each year is Women's History Month. And we have to recognize as a department that was born in 1885, later disbanded and reestablished in 1905, that we recognize the leadership and the accomplishments of our women that we have working within the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection within CAL FIRE for their accomplishments, their contributions, and in this case and many others, the leadership roles that really allow us as a team and our women in leadership individually to really make that difference, ensure their voices are heard, and recognize our women in leadership roles for their accomplishments. So it is a great opportunity this month to have a multi-series podcast to talk to a variety of women working within CAL FIRE in various classifications, whether it is the executive team, whether it is resource management, or whether it is working as a fire captain in the field. Yeah. We have a diverse organization, but unfortunately our diverse organization, when you really look at the statistics of 12,000 people, we recognize that when you take just the safety classifications, just over 5%. When you take the non-safety classifications, they're at about 57%. But when you combine them, they're just under 15% right now. Right. Well, I guess as of the end of December were those statistics. And those numbers will fluctuate, as Serena and I were talking earlier. Those numbers will fluctuate with the hiring of our seasonal staff and the downstaffing of our seasonal staff. But statistically, the numbers don't change dramatically because of the diversity or lack thereof that we hire during those seasonal periods that don't change that statistic dramatically. And so part of this discussion, part of this month is how do we recruit and retain more women into the Department of Forestry Fire Protection, CAL FIRE? How do we recruit and retain women into leadership roles? How do we recruit and retain individuals into fire suppression resource management roles? I am so proud that that when I look at our 21-member executive team, that we are quite diverse as an executive team, I believe. I believe 8 of our 21 are women leadership leaders in the executive team, and we just announced that our Tribal Affairs Deputy Director, Helen Lopez, will be joining us here shortly as well. So I just want to thank you, Serena, for being such a great partner, providing a diverse opinion. It's important that I say that because as a 21-person executive team, we don't always agree, but we work through those and we determine the best path for the department. And it is so important to hear Serena's voice, to hear Kelly's voice, to hear Annalee's voice, to hear Wendy and Wendy's voice, Monica, Carrie, Christy, and soon to be Helen.
Yeah.
So I think I hit everybody.
Yeah, I think so.
But
You'll get in trouble later if you did it.
I will get in trouble later if I didn't. Anyway, Women's History Month, great opportunity. I look forward to the discussion today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, speaking of leadership with the executive team, we do have a very special guest with us today by the name of Serena Ortega, the one and only Serena Ortega, Deputy Director of the Equal Employment Opportunity Office and DE&I program. Welcome, Serena.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I think, as you were talking, I think it's so important to illustrate that, you had mentioned that we have a diverse group of people, but you also mentioned that we don't always see eye to eye, right? We talk these things out, but I think that is such a good quality, and we are very diverse. Even the women on executive team are very diverse. We have different lived experiences and backgrounds and different family makeups, and I think that really contributes to our executive team overall.
Absolutely.
Serena, to kind of kick it off, first question for you is to maybe just tell us about yourself, how you kind of came to become the Deputy Director of EEO and DE&I. What's your experience here with CAL FIRE?
Yeah, so let's see. I started with the state going on 18 years, and I was calculating that just yesterday, and time has passed fast. And I've been with CAL FIRE for about 15 years. I started my career with the state as an administrative assistant to a director's office in a different agency. I was there for just a couple of years, and I had applied for a position with CAL FIRE. And, I think that had a lot to do with my upbringing. My stepfather raised me. He was a law enforcement officer. And so I think public service was really important to me at a very, very young stage in my life. I knew that I wanted to get into this kind of working in the public sector. My mom worked for the legislature, and so I had a lot of background kind of in, how this works and the public sector works in real life. And so, having this really fantastic mission that I got to see my father be a part of, I also got to see my mom be a part of this really important advocacy role. And so, to this day, I remember, a seed was sown at a very young age in walking precincts with my mother very early in her career, and traveling to, Compton, California, and McFarland, and really seeing marginalized communities that needed support through passages or authors of different bills to help support those communities. And it really did sow this seed of advocacy, really deep-rooted in my being, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Funny story is I actually wanted to be a social worker, probably not a surprise to you. I remember looking at roles in the public sector. Job coach was like one of the biggest ones too for EDD. And I really felt this role of being a part of CAL FIRE. Like, what a fantastic mission. There can't be another mission out there that is as cool as CAL FIRE, right? Yeah. And so I finally came on board at CAL FIRE. I passed my first opportunity up because of fear of being a young mother and really not feeling like, am I going to be successful in that? Even though I got offered this really great position, I quickly kind of turned over to, these fears of like, am I going to be like fighting fires? Not necessarily being boots on the ground, but being a part of that. And if I was going to be able to keep up with that as a young parent. So I did. I came on board and I worked for Del Walters, who was the director at that time. And he was amazing to work for. And I worked under him and the chief deputy director at the time as administrative assistant too. And I was able to understand a little bit more about what the EEO program did. And so I was really, really excited to be a part of that. And I actually ended up taking a demotion to join the EEO program. And in that role, there was some definitely harder times there when it comes to see, kind of the inside of what goes on in those programs. And they're not always positive, right? But being a part of that and being able to mitigate some of those things through training and preventative measures, I fell in love with it, quite frankly. So I worked my way up through that. I stayed in the EEO program for several years, and then I promoted to a manager, classification and pay manager, prior to professional standards program being on board, and participated in sort of that performance management role.
Yeah.
Quickly realized that I really miss the EEO world. Performance management is a whole different side of it, right?
Yes.
And so I had the opportunity to go back to the EEO program as an EEO chief, which was really exciting and a great promotional opportunity. And then later on promoted to deputy director in the EEO program. So I've had quite some time in the EEO program, and really this is such a great time for me, because I was recently able to take on the diversity, equity, inclusion program, which is very new to this department. Although I would say we have done a ton of great things to sort of usher that into our organization. But it's here, it's live, and we're creating something really, really great right now.
As you talked about your experience and how you came up and how you've gotten into the role that you're in right now, I think most people across the department are familiar with the 3 letters EEO. Everybody knows that one, right? However, there is this other side to the program that you run, and it's 3 other letters. It's D, E, and I. And that may not be as familiar to all of the folks across the department. As you stated earlier, it's something that is fairly new to this department, even though there's a movement across society for recognizing what DE&I is. And so I was wondering if maybe you could just take an opportunity to give us a little bit of background and context behind what DE&I is and some of maybe the high-level initiatives that we're seeking to endeavor here within CAL FIRE to kind of get people up to speed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I have lots of thoughts on it, quite frankly. Being fully transparent, there is definitely a movement, but there is definitely there is a side of society that doesn't really quite know what it is or what it looks like, or what does that mean for us? And so one of the very important elements in establishing this DE&I program is to dispel misconceptions of what it is. We are the state of California. There is a huge movement. It is very important to me. This is my passion. But one of the things that is really, really important to share about DE&I is that the way that DE&I is sort of manufactured, it really takes an organization to make that occur. It's not a DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion program of Serena's or the DE&I program.
Yeah.
This is a organizational change that, quite frankly, needs to happen with all of us. And so what I think is really important to dispel is that the state of California does not have an affirmative action. This is a merit-based public sector. And so I think that a lot of people come in and think that DE&I is DE&I in every organization. And that's what I think is really important to understand, is the organization, its mission, its culture, understanding that there are differences throughout the state of California. In our organization. There are 21 units.
Right.
And not all one looks the same.
Right.
And so in order to establish a good DE&I program, a successful one, you have to really meet people where they're at. You have to really understand how it's going to align with our organization and our organizational needs, the communities that we serve. And I think that one of the most imperative pieces of the DE&I program is to understand that it is not just a protected category. It is not what I look like or you look like or you look like. It is a lot to do with lived experiences and your background and your cultural feedback and things that you are able to contribute to an organization, whether you can speak a different language or you might be able to provide us with translation or American Sign Language. There are so many different areas one of the things, just a quick analogy that I want to make is, when you have a toolbox, you want to make sure that you have not just a wrench, but that you have the right adapters.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right adapters, then you are going to fail to meet whatever you're trying to fix.
True.
And I see that as our organization, that we have to have different elements in our toolbox to be able to support the communities and our department as a whole. And it can't just be lip service. It has to be true policy, true strategic measures to make sure that we're successful, not just internally with the employees that we serve, but having employees come on board, recruitment, and the way that we associate with our communities. And so, so through that, I think that it's going to take, this being a very new program, it's going to take a lot of meeting with our field staff and understanding their needs and their diverse needs, the units, our partners, the communities we serve, and trying to show how we can utilize the tools that we already have in order to make us more successful. And so I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I definitely resonate with the notion that, it takes more than just, us here in Sacramento to have this conversation. This is going to involve everyone across the department. And I love the idea of us honing in on what the needs of those 21 individual units and the 2 regions, what those specific needs are, because I think that's how we gain the buy-in and understanding of how to make this a department-wide, implementation. And so that makes a whole lot of sense. Makes a whole lot of sense.
The EEO program that we just had a conversation about also includes the newest program, DE&I. A lot of times we use a ton of acronyms within this department, but we all know generally what it is. We're all learning the true aspects of DE&I. But to be quite honest and frank, especially for many in the field and many entering this organization, when they hear the words EEO, they think just a couple of things. One, that's the program that's going to investigate me. And 2, that's the program that now makes me take an hour of EEO training or 2 hours of EEO training every year to ensure that our organization is compliant with laws and regulations. But there is so much more to the EEO DE&I program that you offer and your staff offers to the field. Maybe you could talk to us about what you offer to the field and what you offer to other entities related to these subjects.
Sure. Yes, I would say that EEO is a term that is used throughout the state of California, right? So have I thought about different ideas to change it? Absolutely. But to stick with what the verbiage is across the public sector, we've kept it. But I will say that there are a ton of variations of the EEO program. One, I will say that the EEO training is actually being worked on right now to be more of a training that is more in alignment with a fire station, a firehouse, different elements of a fire department, but also much more important, understanding that we're not just a fire department, that we have variables that are just as important. We have, a ton of different programs that are not just, boots on the ground fighting fires, but also defensible space and state fire marshal and regulations and prevention and so I think it's really important to ensure that we have those training elements readily available for people in different classifications. That's number one. So we are working on hiring, advertising for a training officer to support us in those endeavors. So why that is so important is because not only is it a law in regulation, but it is important because it gives these different elements of what decision I make when these things occur. Why do I need to report these things? Why is it so important if I don't? What are the repercussions? And so really it is mitigating those behaviors or preventing missteps in not only what a firehouse looks like, but also in your office or in the field or in a rural area, from environmental scientists to a firefighter. And so I think it is abundantly clear that training does support, it helps prevent, and it gives insight of what you should and you shouldn't do. So taking the training to the side, the EEO program also, what a lot of people don't know is that we also offer mediation services. So we have a contract through an outside entity where if we feel like there might not be a huge EEO element occurring in an allegation, or even if there is, there may be a need to really just, without any malicious intent and or anybody, really violating any policy, there might just be a personality conflict. And so those measures have been extremely successful. The mediation program is, again, it's an outside entity that kind of gets to hear it holistically from a neutral standpoint, and it has been a great success. So we offer the mediation program. We also work with the regions on bilingual certified employees, and so there's a whole testing process that's conducted in the EEO program. And the Upward Mobility Program, which is a program that has almost been extinct for many other state entities because there hasn't been a whole lot of budget behind it, but we're very excited to work with recruitment and human resources and TSP to kind of uproot that and reinvigorate looking at lower paying classifications and how we can promote those folks. And so, but the big element of EEO here, the big piece, that the most important part I would say is really understanding where people are at in the state and across the 21 units and programs, and really looking at ways that we can improve what is occurring out there or what is not, and best practices. There are units that and programs that we have never touched or that we rarely have to interact with, and hopefully there's something that's going really well there and that we can learn from, right?
Yeah.
So some of the things you said that I want to pick up on is that we're diverse in our lived experiences across the state. And people have different backgrounds, different upbringings, different values that they bring with them from their lived experiences into the workplace. And so I think in part, some of the values, many that you've already talked about, is really that preventive measure by trying to educate our staff on things that are appropriate and maybe aren't appropriate to be saying in the workplace or doing in the workplace. At the same time, recognizing that we all come from diverse backgrounds. It's how do we come together to be more inclusive, quite frankly? How do we be able to have those hard discussions that are respectful discussions? So I certainly appreciate that aspect. So Serena, you mentioned 15 years with the department, and from your experiences that you just described, being in the executive office, being in HR, being in EEO, that we have grown significantly in the last 15 years. And with that, like you said earlier, creates a significant amount of work. As an executive team member, what are some of the greatest changes that you have seen, if any? I mean, you can be honest here. Some of the greatest changes that you have seen within the department, whether broadly or more specifically, that support women in our organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. Wow, there's so many. I think that overall change that I've seen, from my very beginning in the executive team, I think would be that we have received so much support from many different areas to not only as the department has grown, but also that admin support that is really something that for a very, very long time in the EEO program it just was what it was. And so we would always kind of go, sorry, we only have limited staffing, or, as the department grew and there was more challenges and more complexity, it was kind of like, our hands are tied. And so I think that being able to provide not only support for many admin support positions to be parallel ratios with other, uniform staff, but to also kind of see that there's a need there. And that's so incredibly important. So there's one, and I don't know that specifically goes to, women in the women workforce, but I will say that helps supply more boots on the grounds when in terms of an EEO program and supporting women in the field, and everybody, quite frankly. One of the other things that I think is really important to note is that I myself think is such a positive new thing that I've never really seen prior years is being able to see diverse classifications coming into an executive team meeting, women who love this department and allies, and being able to come in and share their love for this department, but also being able to share openly and having a voice at an executive team meeting without all the in-between, and be able to say, here's the needs that we have. And I don't know that there's always been a platform for that. And if there was, I know that there is definite, not fear, but there's this, hierarchy that you always had to kind of go by. And quite frankly, the last time that occurred, our executive team had open arms for these people that came in and provided such a tremendous amount of support, hearing about, concerns of ill-fitted uniforms when women are expecting or they're pregnant. And, being able to talk to these women prior to them coming in and their fears and their worries of, there's a chief and then there's the region chief, and we've never even met our region chief, and being able to comfort these women. And, many folks may not know, but after that meeting where they were able to talk and bring up really important subjects and barriers, but also how we can fix this, was so monumental. There were tears when we left that executive team office. There were women that hugged me and I think that's a journey that I'll never forget. And I think there's still a lot more that's out there that's going to come. And I see really, really great things happening in the future. And I don't know that was ever something that I've ever seen prior to this. And so I think that would be probably the biggest monumental thing that I've ever seen. And, subsequent to that meeting, we now have some really great things happening because of these women that are all different levels, that are part of that through potential Class M optional wear for women that are expecting. And so that is because there was an open forum for women to step out.
Thank you for that. And it quite honestly is your leadership that brought that subgroup together. You heard that concern in the field. You brought that subgroup together. You brought that subgroup to the executive team. We had a great discussion that day, and I'm happy to hear that the individuals that were involved in that felt comfortable to tell us how they were feeling, giving us a lived experience, giving us an experience from the field of how the uniforms currently are worn or are not meeting today's needs, to allow us then to say, all right, we hear you, we recognize that, and put action behind that. And so I'm so proud of where that subgroup has come to, where it's being presented to the Uniform Advisory Committee, just as an example, to put to action, to be available in the field. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me be a part of that.
At one point, there was a young Serena that came into this department, as you've described before. And we've got programs like Camp Cinder, and there's other things out there that are really looking to bring young ladies and women into the fire service and bring them up and show them that this is possible. There's out of those 187 classifications, pick one. If it's something that you're passionate about, pick one, and you can do this. And so maybe the question is for those young women and that young Serena, if you could go back 15, 16, 17 years, what advice do you give those folks now that you've got some more lived experience under your belt, and you know you've come a long way, obviously. And so what do you tell those young folks coming into the fire service now, those young women, those girls, to really prepare them for what this is all like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think that one of the things that that really plays a pivotal role in my upbringing is having some blended upbringing. And so I'm able to, I feel like I'm able to communicate with folks on different levels when it comes to different backgrounds and cultures, right? And so not all, but I think that that we all grow up in a different kind of, like the chief said, we all have diverse backgrounds and morals and values in the way that we grow up. And I will say that I had a really, really great upbringing on with my parents, but I had grandparents that were really special to me and played a pivotal role in my life, right? Why this is important and why I'm bringing this up is that my grandfather was very his thinking was, why are you driving your vehicle and your husband's not driving it?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Why are you working?
Yeah.
Because my grandmother was a caretaker, for our family. And he would say, women should be mild and meek, mild-mannered, And so here's this person that I still idolize to this very day. He was a huge part of my life and taught me so much wisdom and growing up in the Great Depression and war. And but that was his mind frame, right? And what it to me is that, as a young Serena, I was kind of like a little bit like, wait, where am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be like my grandmother, where I should be like the homemaker, or could I do this, or what are the benefits? And I think that no matter where you come from, and it's no knock on who your role model is, right? We all have this background and different way of thinking, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Could be great people, still, but you can be anything. Quite frankly, if you just are passionate about it, you start to naturally start gravitating towards learning more and more and more, and you put yourself in these extremely uncomfortable positions like I have. Again, I don't prefer conflict. I prefer to just kind of everybody get along. But I put myself in committee meetings and applied to be chair in different statewide committees because I knew that I had to, and did it very uncomfortably and scared, quite frankly. And I think, if I can go back, I would also say that I wouldn't change anything. For the longest time, I thought about all the things that I did as a young Serena. I was afraid to speak up, or I would speak up and then I would think about all night long what I said, or I could have said it better, or, I'd second guess myself all the time. And if I never did second guess myself, and I never was that timid person or failed, then I never would have been able to bring anybody along my journey. And I've been able to bring people along with me that are probably a higher level than I am today in different organizations, quite frankly. And I think that's so important, because without those scars and that human failure and getting back up and brushing yourself off, then you lose the importance of contribution to the next person. And so I think that for the young Serena, I would say fall, and that's okay, but get back up and keep trying and be uncomfortable and bring somebody along the way, for sure.
I heard that. That beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Love that.
Serena, I want to thank you again for being part of our executive team, being a leader within CAL FIRE, the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. There's so many things we didn't talk about today, the assistance that you give to other departments within the Natural Resources Agency, assistance that you give to the Natural Resources Agency as a whole, the assistance that you give, and as you said earlier, that you chair across government as a whole here for California. You are a friend, but you are a significant leader in this organization, and I thank you for your contributions and your voice. I thank you for being who you are and being real about the conversations that we have. So I'm glad we're here today. I'm glad we had this discussion.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for letting me have a voice and continuing to support my voice and others.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, folks, you have just heard from a dynamo here within CAL FIRE. And, there is much more to come from what Serena Ortega is doing for the department and with the department. So let's all stand back and watch in awe as these things happen. Folks, this has been another great podcast for us. Again, happy Women's History Month to all of the women in the organization and, quite frankly, to everyone. And let's continue to celebrate all of the accomplishments that we all do together to make this department a great organization. I'm Monte Manson. This has been another great 5 Points podcast with the Chief. Again, you can find us on all kinds of social media platforms. If you know of it, we're there. Go grab it, listen to it on all of your travels, back and forth, anywhere you need to go. We've got you covered. But until then, we will see you next time. We're going to consider this podcast cooked. Have a great time.